Lesson 20: Sharing state between components. 1. Introduction. Sometimes, when you're building a React application, you'll want the state of two different components to always update together. The key idea here is to lift state up. That means you remove the state from both of the child components, move it to their closest common parent, and then pass it down to each of them using props. Lifting state up is one of the most common and fundamental practices in React because it allows different parts of your user interface to stay in sync with one another. 2. Lifting state up by example. Imagine you have a parent component, called accordion, that renders two child components, which we'll call panels. Each panel has a piece of state that determines whether it's currently visible or hidden. Initially, both panels are independent. When you press the Show button on one of them, it becomes visible, but the other one remains hidden. Their state values operate separately. Now, suppose you want to change that behavior so that only one panel can be open at a time. When you open the second one, the first should close automatically. To do this, you'll need to coordinate both panels, and that's exactly what lifting state up allows you to achieve. 3. The process of lifting state up. There are three main steps to lift state up properly. Step 1. Remove state from the child components. You begin by removing the local state from each child. Instead of each panel having its own active status, that information will be provided by the parent component. The parent will now decide which panel is active and pass that information down as a prop. Step 2. Pass hard-coded data from the common parent. Next, you identify the closest common parent of the two components you want to coordinate. In our case, that's the accordion component. The parent becomes the single source of truth for which panel is active. At first, you can simply pass hard-coded values from the parent to test the behavior. By doing this, you make sure that the parent is now controlling each panel's state. Step 3. Add state to the common parent. Finally, you add the actual state to the parent component. Instead of each panel having its own Boolean flag, the parent will have a variable that tracks which panel is currently active, for example, by using a number that represents the active panel's index. When the user clicks on one of the panels, the parent's state is updated, and React automatically re-renders the panels with the new active configuration. This ensures that only one panel can be expanded at a time. By completing these three steps, you've successfully lifted the state up. The parent component now coordinates its children, and the user experience becomes consistent. 4. Deep dive. Controlled and uncontrolled components. In React, you'll often hear about controlled and uncontrolled components. A component with its own internal state is considered uncontrolled. For instance, our original panel was uncontrolled because it decided on its own whether it was active or not. The parent couldn't influence that behavior. Once we lifted the state up, the panel became controlled. That's because it now depends on props passed by its parent, the accordion, to determine whether it's active. The parent fully controls its behavior. Uncontrolled components are generally easier to set up since they manage their own state internally. However, they're less flexible when you want multiple components to work together. Controlled components, on the other hand, offer much more flexibility, but they require the parent component to provide all the necessary data and event handlers. In real-world applications, most components are a mix of both controlled and uncontrolled behavior. As a developer, you'll decide which information should be handled locally and which should be controlled from above. And don't worry, this is something you can always refactor later as your app evolves. A single source of truth for each state. In a typical React app, many components will hold their own state. Some of that state will live deep within leaf components, like form inputs, while other pieces of state will live closer to the top of the component tree. The important thing is that for each unique piece of information, there should be one clear owner, the single source of truth. That doesn't mean putting all your state in one place, but rather ensuring that each piece of data lives in exactly one component and is shared downward through props when needed. As your application grows, you'll naturally find yourself moving state around, sometimes lifting it up to coordinate components, and other times moving it back down when local control is enough. This flexibility is what makes React's design so powerful. 5. Recap. Let's summarize the key ideas from this lesson. When you need two components to coordinate their behavior, lift their shared state up to their closest common parent. The parent then passes the necessary data down through props. The parent also passes event handlers down so the children can request changes to that shared state. Controlled components rely on props and give the parent full control, while uncontrolled components manage their own state internally. By applying these principles, you'll create React applications that are consistent, predictable, and easy to maintain, because each piece of state will always have a single, clear source of truth.